issue of natural versus normal consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And so, oh, I hear an echo. No, it's gone. Okay, so the question then is the distinction between why would I object to Santikaro translating what I assume is the Thai word Dhammachat into the word natural, where I would prefer for it to be the word normal.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that conversation we had a couple of days ago?
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason that I would use the distinction is that if we call it natural, that almost then assumes that, oh, this is the right way to do it, or this is the correct, it's the natural way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But if we use the word normal, then that's a kind of word then that can be broken out so that you can see what kind of problems there are in it. And so another quality that's really valuable in looking in and researching it from Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's perspective is to recognize that, oh, wow, wait a minute, we actually have to understand there are two kinds of consciousness, and that we all use two different kinds of consciousness in our own language to describe what's going on. And that we do that without understanding what we're doing. So changing the verbs around, we could use even the word, for instance, sense consciousness. We could now apply one of the senses, for instance, the eye consciousness. But what eye consciousness is seeing. Seeing, actually seeing. Now, what I mean by seeing is for the eyes to pick up light and shadow and color and shapes and even detect emotion.
Okay, got it.
All right. And so that's all that the eye can do. It's the other kind of consciousness that then is the result of the processing done that takes that bare bones consciousness of the eye itself and manufactures the actual image that now has a story built into it.
Oh, okay. Wait, so if I understand correctly, what's happening is, right, so there's several things. There's the normal consciousness of the eye itself, and then there's eye, like the normal consciousness of the eye, plus form, plus eye consciousness, which is the interpretation of the raw, like light, motion. That three things together becomes the sense contact for like the visual, for the visual sense. Oh.
Exactly. And that would in fact, you use the right word then, contact. Or pasa, which is the next step in Paticca Samuppada. So you have bare bones consciousness or the sense consciousness, followed then by a step that's in Paticca Samuppada referred to as nama rupa.
Mind body, I think.
Well, not mind body, but in fact, reality versus the name of reality.
So
Rupa is real, and nama is the name. So what we do with the eye is see the real, and then we process that into the name of the real.
Oh,
it's just the tree.
So this becomes like a more complicated set of data, basically, in our minds. It gets built up something it isn't actually.
So there's something that's real that started in the original consciousness, but that then it was, let's say, remanufactured to create something on the inside that then can be sensed then by the mind.
So it's like interpreted.
But
something that can get you.
But isn't this like this nama then? It can be seen as nama, and then it's rupa again, right? Because you actually see an image in your mind, basically, if you can wake up to it, basically, right?
Right, but what you're basically now understanding is that you can understand that this is a process that you go through. And now I've got a huge number of examples of it. Mm-hmm. One of them is that you get out of your car and you go into 7-Eleven or some fast food place or something, and while you're in there getting what you came for, you notice one of the girls behind the counter. Mm-hmm. And then you come out and you get in your car and you start thinking about that girl, but now what you're looking at is not the girl herself. You're looking at the image that you formed of that girl when your eyes laid on her. You also laid a mental image on yourself. Mm-hmm. So what you're remembering as you drive down the road is the image that you constructed of her. Mm-hmm. Not the real girl. Not only that, but that image that we construct is not the real girl. Mm-hmm. It's our imagination or our illusion of that girl. Mm-hmm. And that's what Santikaro is calling natural consciousness. I guess that's because it's really natural to start thinking about that girl after we leave the shop.
But isn't this so? Isn't the the time when you recognize this? Isn't the picture or the idea that you before had unconsciously, basically, because you weren't really aware of it, and then you become aware of it, and isn't it then recognized by one of the sense consciousness or something? Because it becomes kind of, it feels like it's being sensed again in a way.
Ah, okay. So then in that regard, what we're saying is that all the sensing that was done now is being done actually inside the mind.
Yeah.
That the eyes are no longer needed or no longer necessary. So in that regard, yes, it is eye consciousness, but now is all internalized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And that right now, in this current moment, when we're talking about this, basically what's happening is that this is kind of unexplored territory for you, that you've got a little bit of insight into this, but that now that we're talking about it and bringing it up, it gives you something to kind of be on guard for, in the sense of what contacts you is not what's real. What contacts you is what you made up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That gives you a tremendous amount of freedom. And one of the freedoms is the freedom to begin to see, wait a minute, I will continue to look and investigate, which means in this regard, gather more actual sense data, mm-hmm. rather than relying upon the first crack at it. Mm-hmm. This is an example of what I mean about first impressions. All right. Okay, that we'll have a first impression, we'll see something new, and then we will create an internal image, a new construction. And then that's what we then will hang on to. And that the invitation is, oh no, don't keep that image. Keep looking, keep observing, keep watching what's going on at the sense door level. That a lot of what meditation is all about basically is learning to turn on this set of sense doors, and then spending your time in those sense doors and less time in that sense door of consciousness that's an internal system.
Right.
And so if you look at it that way, then what's really natural is the sense doors.
Yeah.
And that what is then normal is that we pay more attention to the internal representation. In the Pali, it's called the Salayatana, as opposed to the Atana. And in other sutras, the Buddha flat out talks about the external senses and the internal senses. Now, here's something really interesting, and that is that all of our ability to create, or all of our ability of having consciousness, has to do with the source material, in the sense that all of what you can see in your mind is because you have the ability to see with your eyes. So even though you can construct lines and architectural drawings and all of that kind of stuff, you can do that only because you have the ability to understand and see a straight line that you got from nature. The straight lines are all over the place, especially when you get around human habitation. Okay, so this is what we're getting at then, is that, but here's an example then we can't do. And that is that flowers often give out ultraviolet light that the bees can see, so that the bees can all individually in a group look at a field of flowers and see the spots of where the bees need to go, or in fact, if this whole field has not been beed yet, and so we got full gain, or whether that whole place is actually empty now because we have gotten it all. They can see that just by looking out on the field, and humans can't do that. But what we can do is we can take electronic equipment and shift frequencies, so that we can shift the ultraviolet down an octave into the Armstrong level unit where human eye form can be, and then we can recognize, there are various colors and shapes and movements up in the ultraviolet world that I was not able to see. The same thing with telescopes and radio telescopes and all of that kind of equipment on one end, and also microscopes. And another one would be mathematics, or the kind of tools that humans use to extend their range of understanding, or to be able to improve that consciousness, but is all still sense-based oriented. If we cannot create a machine to help us sense it with our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, taste, etc., then there is no way that we can have it as a consciousness of the normal kind, or of this salayatana, this internal representation. We have no way of constructing it. But if I can, for instance, see an ultraviolet camera's videoing of how the bees are taking the pollen out of the flower systematic. Imagine you had 100 people that had a whole acre or so of flowers, and each one of them is going to meticulously go do what the bee does. But every flower that the guy goes to, one of his friends may have already visited that flower. And so it will take literally hours and hours and hours for the humans to do what the bees could do in 5 minutes, because they can see what they're doing. And I think that that's just one example of the remarkable part of human beings are actually quite limited to what we can be conscious of because of the limits of our own senses. But that animal comparison one-on-one, the humans are far ahead of any of the other species because of our ability to extend our senses by manipulating them with electronics.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Can I ask? Okay. So what I don't really get is the distinction between what is called like the sense doors and the thing that in the book is called natural consciousness, because what for example would be like, because for me it in every sense door, so there's stuff that's not seen until I see it. And for example, let's say you talked with Christian a few weeks ago about these, for example, these drivers from transactional analysis, and
yeah, TA,
yeah,
right.
And what, for example, what would be that if you recognize something like some driver, like the hurry up driver you mentioned, where you you walk around, do your stuff, and suddenly you see, okay, I'm right now, or let's say I'm in a victim position right now. So this also, to me, feels like kind of, I see that in one sensor. Basically, I recognize that and I can see it, and I'm kind of free of it for a while.
All right. One of the ways that we can begin to look at that is that as you leave that store after seeing the girl that we were talking about a moment ago, then you can have thoughts like, oh, wow, she's too good for me. I'll never be able to get her. And so now you're adding victimhood right into it.
Right.
All right. And that victimhood may not have arisen right when you were looking at her. You were too gaga, but a minute later, now you go into victim. Mm-hmm. Now, how to say it? But there's a lot of stuff that you can't see that are important qualities. For instance, by looking at the girl behind the counter, you cannot see how many children she has, how many ex-husbands she's got. You cannot see the mother that hates all the men that her daughter has ever had, and therefore has contributed to how many husbands she's got. Okay, none of that kind of stuff is apparent.
Yeah.
And yet that's exactly the kind of stuff that weighs down on her mind. And that's what keeps her being a victim. Oh, he might like the way that I look, but boy, if he knew anything about me, he'd hate me. Would be the kind of thought that she could have then that would put her into being a victim. Where in fact, she doesn't know anything. This is why I recommend keep investigating. Don't come to conclusions. And a very simple conclusion that many guys will come to is, I've got to have her. And so intentionally not drawing conclusions means that we actually stop filling out that portrait that we have in our minds of who she actually is. Because if we look at it directly and get more information, then we'll get a more accurate picture. But if we merely invent and put our own thoughts and feelings into that picture, then we're getting further and further away from reality. And one of the ways that I would generally define then suffering is suffering, the amount of suffering depends upon how far we are from reality. That when we're actually spot on with reality, there's no suffering. But when we get way far away from reality, now we're adding our own junk to it. Our own, what the Pali word is, the sankhara. And this is what's added to it during that process that we call namarupa. Now, that namarupa may in fact sit there and spin over the course of a few minutes as we're developing an internal representation or a picture. And while we're doing that, if we're constantly adding new data, then we can keep it real to a degree. But basically, if we just take it as an image, and now all the rest of the processing is done based upon our old desires, fears, motivations, winner or loser positions, all of that, and then will be added to that nama as we begin to tell ourselves a story about what we just saw.
Gotcha.
Okay, and so that story that we just saw then is all going to be all of the sense doors. You mentioned the word door a while ago, and that's actually a good way of looking at it. We do not have a way of getting at real reality.
Right.
That we are limited to 5 doors.
Right.
And there is so much that other animals, they have other doors.
Mm-hmm.
The dog has the nose door, but many predators do. Lions have really good nose doors. And one of the things that animals like that can do is they can smell fear. They can smell it in the air. They say love is in the air. I think that only some people can smell that. But we're not very good at smelling. That's a door that's kind of closed to human beings, but we can open it up again. And so, in fact, that whole quality of let's spend more time opening these sense doors and get into the real world. And by doing so, being in the sense door means that we have to be in the here now. Because that's where that sense door operates. It doesn't operate in the past and the future, but the other kind of consciousness. The normal kind of consciousness that we spend all of our time with can get really old really fast. For instance, you get in your car and you drive down the street, and there that girl still is. She's really in the past. In reality, she's 5 minutes ago. But in the normal reality, here she is.
Gotcha. So I think this is a good point for me to stop here because I'm probably gonna get some sleep. But yeah, okay. I'll probably come back when I get like in a full 8 hours of sleep.
Okay, Willie. So that was. I'm glad to see you. We'll talk about whatever you wrote while you wrote 5 minutes ago. That's why I invited you on. It's because I hadn't had a chance to read all of that, but I'll read it later, and we'll do that one too.
Okay, see you guys. It was nice to meet you.
Bye. Have a good night, Willie. Okay. Quick question again.
Sure, absolutely.
To me, it seems like there's absolutely a sense of like being more or less in the here now, but to me it seems like it's all levels, right? You can always be like, you can think or you can have the feeling that you're fully in the here now, but then you recognize that there's still like the feeling of for example, you sit in meditation and you think you're fully in the here now, but then and at one instance you kind of get aware of there being more nama in the background, like I'm sitting here and outside there's a bird. And if you drop that, then there's even more here nowness, let's say, right?
Right.
And so that I would say is down here, and I can also be like more up here in the structure of thoughts, but can also be pretty much in the here now with them. So I can be mindful while thinking about something, right? I can kind of be there, but I'm totally aware that there's like levels beneath that, but I can still be in the here now and at that level, right?
I think I understand your question. So let me give it a go. And actually, I would say that this is kind of an important question, and that one of the words that you used is the word background. Now, on a modern processor, on a modern PC, the hardware, the Intel processor has enough stuff so that in DOS, we could not do background programming. There was what they call TSR, which would mean terminate, and stay resident, which means the code was always there, and at some event could then send the processor to stop processing what was on the screen, like a keystroke, and then go and do that process that was sitting there. Okay, now we call it background, but basically what that means is that the processor is now sophisticated enough with a sophisticated operating system, so that programs can start in the background and do something only because they're resident in the system, and then it starts processing what you see on the screen. An example of that would be transferring a file.
Right.
Okay, so that file transfer, according to the internal processing speed, once I say to read that file so that I can write it over there, when I read, now I've got loads and loads of time because that hard drive is relatively slow. So we come back and do the stuff on the screen. When the read is finished, then an interrupt happens, and now the little write program says, okay, now that I got my buffer full, now hard drive over there, you write this. And now he can go back to sleep because now it's really going to take a long time. Yeah. And when that write is finished and everything is cleaned up at the hardware level, then he says, okay, I want to read some more off of this hard drive. Okay, so that background, actually the processor has loads of time to do loads of transfers, all in an own separate program, all of them in the background. They're just taking up space in the sense of memory in the computer. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes there's so much happening in the computer that you need to put it off to the side in what's called a kind of a buffer. It's the page sys file when you roll pages out, so that you can roll this one in. So you've actually got a process that's actually running, but in order to get it up and running, its code has actually been spun out. So now we got to go read the disk, bring that program in, and then start it up. Okay, so all of these kind of things happen. Now let's put this to the human brain, because we're doing something exactly like that at the neurological level, in the sense that these thoughts that you're talking about having are not really in the background. They're just they're just kind of resident there in the mind, and then the mind will then take the time to play that out for a few instructions, in the sense of giving you a flash or giving an image or doing something really quick. And then we come back to the base senses, and then something else will flash, and then it'll be here, okay? And we start calling that the background. This is really good. This is a good point, because now we say, oh, we've got something actually worthwhile paying attention to now, is this kind of salayatana that keeps popping in and stealing cycles. It used to have all the cycles to itself. Every mind moment belonged to the salayatana. Now it's only getting about 10% of the time. Mm-hmm. But the capability of doing the salayatana or doing the perception is still there. And that, in fact, it's very, very closely associated with fourth jhana. Mm-hmm. Is when the student then can go down to the point of what is perception itself and what is non-perception, in the sense that we can have just enough perception to perceive the consciousness. But there, at that level, is only the sense consciousness, because the perception is not manufacturing now the big consciousness or the normal consciousness, the salayatana, the internal stuff. We can bring the mind down to that state where we can do it, and the Buddha talks about it in several suttas. One of them is Badaya Sutta, where he says the seen is merely the seen, and the heard is merely the heard. That means at that level that we're totally in senses, and not making a whole lot, or not making at that level any internal sense organizations out of it at all. Yeah. Now, Now that's dangerous. In fact, the end of the sutta that talks about this, Bhaddadi got killed by a cow. How could, I mean, and so the end of the sutta was about the Buddha making arrangements for his funeral. Because even though he wasn't a member and wasn't ordained by the Buddha, he was still a, let's say, a mendicant. He was still a bhikkhu. He was still a wandering ascetic. And within one instruction, the Buddha was able to tell him what to do, but he didn't say how dangerous this was. You got to go sit with the Sangha. You got to go all by yourself. You can't go out in the rice paddy where the cows are. And here's the reason why. And that is that if you cannot perceive danger, and that's what was going on, that he was not, he could see the cow, but he could not perceive danger. And so it's not a wise idea to walk around in this state, to where perception is getting closed down and you're seeing only the scene. No, I think, in fact, we need that perception in order to keep alive sometimes. That's what the whole mechanism is about, that instinct, is to be able to perceive danger.
Yeah. Yeah, what I mean is more like, not like, so I don't have these experience like where everything shuts down, but what I'm getting more and more right now in my practice is like this sense of, like, this is also closely related to the sense of being satisfied to me, because then I can be satisfied with what is seen, and then it, like, the stinginess of stuff isn't there anymore, but I can fully attend to it when it's necessary. Like, there is this there's a kind of knowing that there is seeing, and when the seeing needs attention, then I can attend to it and act. But if not, then then it's totally cool that there is seeing. Right?
Yes. And that's in fact, that's actually the word Buddha or Buddho, or the word Bodh actually means to wake up. This is what this whole process is about. And by waking up and seeing what's going on, it actually gives us a great sense of power, and we need to be able to see that too, and understand that we've got a kind of power now that ordinary people don't have, because we can see things that they're not even looking for. All right, so in that regard now, there is a power in being able to see this stuff, and then we want to remain observant, because we see the power of seeing, we spend more time seeing. Now, in this regard, I'm using the word seeing, but I do want to bring it out to any of the senses, that the word seeing here is kind of a metaphor for also hearing, or when we're eating food, tasting, or when we're sitting, experiencing the body, that would be touching. And also working with the internal proprioceptive system, so that we know the postures of the body, we can experience that, and we can work with the breath. So a lot of this stuff then has to do with waking up to the reality of the moment, and the only way that we can do that is with our senses. That's how we experience the reality of the moment. And furthermore, there's a whole lot of stuff happening that we have no dream about, because we have no capability of it. There's a whole lot of stuff happening, and we're just not aware of it. But what there is possible and capable of us being awake to and aware of, we're not even up to 5% of that. Because we spend so much time in seeing, thinking, creating, feeling, wanting, desiring, being selfish, And none of those steps along the way of Paticca Samuppada is being in the here now.
Mm.
And so this is why Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about why it's so important to have wisdom at the point of contact. In other words, to see this internal system that we've got, so that then we can take control over the feelings that we have. But that's kind of the beginner's method. That's what the beginner does. Once he gets to about 20 years under his belt and he can get pretty good at doing that, now he can go down to that next level, down beyond the Salayatana, down to perception level itself.
Mm.
That we can get the mind quiet enough and still enough to see that stuff directly.
To see what directly?
Directly, we can see the sense consciousness as a sense consciousness without processing it. That we can see, merely see. And when we hear, we merely hear. We're not interpreting it or trying to understand. For instance, the police, the Gestapo come and stomp up on your front porch and bang on your door. Knock, 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 knock. Okay. Now, actually, all we heard was heavy footsteps and a heavy knock.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say with that, that's all you actually do hear. All of the rest of it is imagination. That in fact it may not be the police. It may be the kids playing with daddy's shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, but the problem is then if the imagination is not conscious, right? If it's conscious, then it's just happening and you can not.
The word imagination we could actually use as another word for natural consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I want to use the word normal because we normally spend our time in imagining things.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, if it's conscious, if you are aware that this imagination is happening, then and then you can be satisfied with it happening, then it isn't really a problem, right? Because it's just something that's coming up. If you're not like getting freaked out about it, and you can be aware of it.
You're right. Okay, here's a good example. The coronavirus, right now, you're at home, you're not exposed to anyone, you're doing all of the right things, you're already monitoring your body, you know that you don't have a temperature, you know that you don't have sniffles, and the most important characteristic is breathing. Okay? But if you were having trouble breathing, then Anapanasati would certainly be the right solution to it. Let's take some deep breaths. Let's get those lungs that, it may be Corona 19 or it may not be. It may be Corona 7.
It might just be anxiety.
Yes, or it might be anxiety. So let's always keep taking those deep breaths because, in fact, you're not you particular, but just ordinary folks out there in this day and age, today itself, are much more likely to suffer from anxiety than they are to suffer from coronavirus itself. The anxiety about coronavirus then is that salayatana, that's that natural consciousness. The real consciousness of the body and experience the body. I'm not sick. If I'm not sick, then I'm okay, but I'm taking precautions. I'm secluded. I'm alone, etc., like that. And yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay, this is nice. This is wonderful. But people are not doing that. They're freaking themselves out because they're adding their own levels of fear into the picture that they're painting in their minds of what is coronavirus. But if people could have another, for instance, attitude about it, or let us say, different kind of information to create their picture with, a different Sankara mix.
Right.
Then the new one would be, oh, well, I've been practicing breathing meditation and anapanasati for years now. I know how to breathe. And I know that coronavirus 17 is a virus that affects the breathing, that it creates and causes pneumonia. And I've had pneumonia before, and I got myself out of it then. If I get pneumonia again, I can breathe my way out of it again. I know how to breathe. I've been practicing. Okay. That's a completely different attitude now. And in fact, continuing to breathe well, maybe even if you do have the coronavirus, it'll be quite mild because of your attitude. But if the attitude is, oh no, I'm about to catch it, I'm going to die, I know for sure, then more than likely, if you do catch it, you're going to get a whole lot sicker. And then if you shut down and don't breathe, then the pneumonia will get you, even if the coronavirus didn't.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's one thing I wanted to ask, because as I recall, when we started, it was we were working a lot on like getting out of like throwing the crap out of the mind and getting out of a victim's position. And then after a while, you emphasized more the nature, the quality of being satisfied. And the way
that's what we're talking about again today. It's the same old stuff.
yeah, of course. But the thing I was wondering is that the order is still like getting into the attitude of I can do this, and then be satisfied, and then actually staying satisfied. Because if you are not in the attitude of I can do this, then you can't be satisfied with anything really, because it becomes overwhelming and you see yourself as a victim again, right?
So that attitude, I can do this, is actually better than vitamin C. That in fact, that's what the placebo is really all about. You know what I mean by the placebo?
Yeah.
They have normally pegged placebo at 27, 28%. But there are situations where you can drive that placebo up. Okay. For instance, we don't know anything about coronavirus, but they have in the past done experiments like that. So somebody's got sick, let's say they've got the flu. And because they're part of an experiment, they don't know that, in fact, they're just part of the control group. But they still get hospitalized. They put on hospital gowns. They get in the hospital bed. They have all the hospital stuff hooked up to them, including maybe a saline drip. And then the doctor says, oh, I'm going to put this stuff in the drip, and it's going to make you feel really good. Okay. When you go with the placebo that far into it, so that you're really, really tricking the mind, the placebo rate will go up nearly 46% is where it topped off. Doing nothing but convincing the person that they're going to be all right.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you can actually work with your own mind so that you know that you're going to be all right, that this is going to, even if it kills you, you're still going to die well.
Yeah.
But along the way, before you die, even if you've got severe pneumonia, one more breath. I can do at least one more deep breath. And then one more deep breath. That's all I need to do to stay alive, is just take a deep breath. I can do this. I can do one more breath. I don't know why they don't talk about that in wars where people get shot. Just take another deep breath. That's all I'm asking. You can die in 5 minutes from now or whatever, but right now, take a deep breath. Instead, they shake the guy and they say, hang in there, stay alive. That's not going to help anything. Breathing. And we can remember to breathe. So this is an important quality. It has to do with this attitude. And that I just had one of the students calling today about what does she do about anxiety. Well, anxiety now is the new meditation object because she can see it. Last week she was sick. Okay, well now having no energy and being sick, now that's our meditation object. Right. We're going to lay here and we're going to breathe and we're going to say, I can get over this being sick. The body's not that sick. Okay, now that she's freaked herself out about coronavirus, we can say, you're not sick right now. You got the day off. There's no place to go. Sit here and enjoy the day. You're not in contact with anybody. You're feeling good. So stop flipping yourself out about it. And I gave her a lot of detail. An example would be the barking dog. Because, in fact, the anxiety that she was experiencing is very much like having a pet dog that's out barking when it's unnecessary. The human goes out and he checks, okay, the dog doesn't need to bark. Now we can take the dog in and we can calm the dog down and down boy, you're okay. We don't need you to bark right now. Later, if somebody tries to break in the house, we want you to bark then. But right now, there's nobody breaking in. There's no problem. So we can do that with our anxiety also. But in this regard, what we're looking at is all of that anxiety was internal consciousness, or this normal kind of consciousness that is also called salayatana, and that was all concocted out of old fear. But ultimately goes down to the fear of death. And so if someone's completely fearless, then we automatically have the idea, I can do this. I can do this. I can take that next deep breath. And eventually when I come to the point of, wait a minute, I'm not going to be able to take another one. Can you do a smile if you can't do a breath?
Yeah. Okay.
And so we can die happily because we're staying in our senses in this sense moment. But anxiety is all about the past, all about the future.
Yeah.
And that it's not there in the background. It just, even though you're in the senses now, it will come up and then it'll go back down. The problem is that if it comes up and stays up, now we lose that sense of well-being. We lose the sense of pleasure. We lose the sense of being satisfied. Because when we're uptight about coronavirus or whatever, that's not a satisfying position to be in. So then the right thing to do is push that stuff out and say, no, I'm going to sit here and be satisfied instead.
Yeah, I have a question there. Because pushing out to me sounds like
too much work.
Yeah. to me it feels more like, so what I do if I recognize that I'm in a state of like worry or something, when I can remember, I ask myself, can I be satisfied with this? And this kind of like pulls the rug out from underneath it, and I don't have to push it out. It just.
But you did. Do you know how you pushed it out?
Yeah, but pushing.
What did you say?
Yeah, it's true.
What did you say?
Yeah, it's true. I pull the rug and then it falls over, kind of.
Exactly. That's when one's right effort becomes skillful.
Yeah. Okay.
It becomes actually quite easy to do. So even though I'm saying pushing it out, that sounds like the absolute beginner's way of doing it. Oh no, all you had to do is just kind of flick it out with your mind. On the computer, by the way, on the IBM mainframe, they had one instruction that was more common than any other instruction throughout of all of the code that could be pushed in and processed. And that instruction had branch and link register. Now, what that instruction does means wherever I am right now, I can store where I am right now and then go process over there, leaving that information in that register so that this guy, the next time he does a branch and link register, he comes to what's in this place and goes there, leaving his own trail behind him in that register of where he came from. So this is actually a very easy thing to look at in the computer. This is a very common instruction. And what that means is that your thoughts can change that quickly. They're that easy to do.
Mm.
And one's right effort then is to change what the mind is thinking about into something wholesome and stop thinking about what was unwholesome.
Mm-hmm.
With the computer, we don't have any question about what's wholesome or not. That's why we don't know what a virus. We want to not get a virus. They're unwholesome, but the computer can't tell the difference. Okay? But you can. You can tell the difference between what you're going to allow your mind to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it to me, it more and more feels like, I mean, in Western Dhamma, there's always a lot of talk about like purification and stuff like this, and to me, it more and more.
But that's what you just did.
Yeah, and to me, it feels more like actually the thing that's happening is you're getting more skilled at staying present, staying satisfied with whatever comes up, and then there's no purification to be done really, because
that's the purification process itself. That is the purification.
Yeah.
Is to catch the unwholesome and throw it out and replace it with wholesome. Throw the past out, throw the worry out, throw the anxiety out. Mm-hmm. And do we do that by thinking a wholesome thought instead? It's just the next instruction.
Yeah. Yeah, because to me, a long time it sounded like I had to purify something, but now it feels more like I have just to develop the skills of staying satisfied, and the purification is basically, it comes for free on top.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do exactly.
Mm.
It's just a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
It's just a way of talking about it. Or these are two different concepts to describe the same experience.
Yeah, but it's less like it's less like a sense of having to do it, or being stressed out about having to do it, like having to work with the purification itself, kind of. To me, it sounded like that, like a long time. That I actually have to with my little hammer work on this one.
I know. Right. Okay. Here's the distinction is that you're thinking that a purification is like doing a great big job, like with your hammer and chisel of doing your own David.
Yeah.
Okay. But the purification is not the David that's within the statue that you're chipping away to get down to. The purification is happening all along. The David is in that piece, and every time you hit a chisel, that's purification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's not the purified object, it's the purification process of doing that chipping away. And that's exactly what your Anapanasati practice is. Yeah. It's the chipping away.
It's the process, not the thing.
Not the result. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's another way of talking about it, that every time that you throw the unhappy thought or the anxiety or whatever thought out and come back into a state of satisfaction, That's just more chipping away at it.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Great. One more thing I wrote down that I wanted to ask is I'm not quite clear on what's the difference between right view and right attitude is right now. Like in the Eightfold Path, what's the difference between the right view and right attitude?
Right view and right attitude?
Yes.
Right view is like the pianist going to the store and buying the manuscript music for a new song she wants to play.
Mm-hmm.
And right attitude is when she can actually play it.
Okay.
That right attitude comes first. If we don't know what piece of music we're going to play, we wind up probably playing something else anyway.
Okay.
And in fact, in that regard, right attitude was what students need in order to even start a meditation practice. And what is that right view? Mm-hmm. And what is that right view? The right view is that, I can see some suffering. I can see where there is need for improvement. Mm-hmm. Let me go try this out to see if it will work.
So the right view
That's one's right view.
So the right view would be you pointing out that there is even that there is actually some suffering right now, and there's a way there's even a kind of a technique to even do something about it, right?
Yes. So in fact, we could go so far. I won't take too long to do it, but let's go through doubt, because the eradication of doubt is actually part of the construction of one's right view, so that we know, and that when doubt is eradicated completely, it's because now we do have a right noble view. And so the first doubt that has to be eradicated is, who made this mess? I do suffer. Whose fault is it? Who can I go to? Who can I pay some money to? What kind of doctor has some instrument he can shove up my whatever and I'll feel good? Okay, that's the first doubt. What priest to go to? What sackcloth and what ashes and what fraternity or religious order to join? All of that kind of stuff is based in that kind of doubt about who am I going to get to fix me up. Okay, and the answer to that one is ain't nobody. Nobody's going to help you at all. Sorry about that. The help shop is closed. That bank you put all of your stock in is burned down, and there ain't nobody going to help you. Okay, that's the first level of doubt. When we come to that, then the second level of doubt is, well, if nobody's going to help me, can I do it myself? And so we begin to grow in confidence and gaining confidence, and you're already to the point you're saying, yeah, I can do it. Sure, I can do this. I can help myself. I can come out of suffering. We're getting pretty darn good at it now. Okay. And so then the third layer of doubt is when we fully get into the study of the Eightfold Noble Path, the Four Noble Truths, we recognize how these tools fit together in our own practice and recognize that this is truly the way out. That I have the tools that I need and I'm becoming skilled in those tools. So not only can I do it myself, but I've got all the equipment necessary to do it. This is what the Buddha talks about, knowledge and vision that of what is and is not the path. Because what is not the path is society. We've been expecting society to make us happy. We've been expecting society to keep us healthy from the coronavirus. You can't count on the society to do that, but you can count on your own behavior.
Because when the shit hits the fan, everyone goes crazy.
Okay, so that's the eradication of the third doubt, which means we have knowledge and vision of what is and is not the path. We know we can follow it, and so that a doubt is eradicated. That doubt being eradicated is also the quality of leaving us with noble right view. And the right attitude then is also there in the sense of, I can do it. This is possible. I know I can do it. So right view and right attitude run and circle around each other, around with right effort and right sati. Exactly. Exactly so. They run and circle around each other, with the starting point being the right view. And as it circles, it gets more and more powerful, but so do all of the others. And so that what really emerges is this very, very high quality, noble attitude of being successful, of being high quality. And at that last minute of life would be, can I take another breath? Yes, I can. I can do one more.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where we come into it. That's how the right Eightfold Noble Path actually is the factor that helps complete eradication of doubt. And with that comes a kind of fearlessness automatically, that I can handle anything, even getting dead. I can do a good job of that too.
Yeah. Great.
All right. Well, if you like, we can cut this off now, and you can go and piddle with this, because this whole point about consciousness, that's something to mull over, to think about, to look into, to figure out for yourself, to see if you can actually get into that kind of state, so that you actually seeing as merely the seen. One of the ways of practicing that way, by the way, is to with the concept of an object. That if you look and your eyes rest on a certain object to the point that the eye begins to pay attention to it, to the point that perception comes into play, so you start to think about it, you immediately move your eye field to some other object. You do not allow the eyes to rest upon anything that long enough for you to start perceiving it or start telling yourself a story about it. So you keep jumping and keep moving. And pretty soon you'll be able to see how you can, in fact, stop this perception.
Yeah.
By changing the object.
And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with internal stuff, right? With thoughts or something. If you really stay with something, you see that it actually like.
You can do that with all of the sense organs, including the body. Yes, internally, I assume you mean by that. Exactly.
Yeah, I also mean like with sense impressions, because I've been doing this. I've done a guided meditation some time ago where this was the point of seeing, of like kind of noting nama or rupa, but in like, for example, if someone tells you a story, you automatically have pictures popping up in your mind, and you actually get sensitive to that and kind of be aware if there's a story basically forming, right?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, start to pay attention to how we do that. That's the way we begin to understand who we are, is by recognizing I ain't nothing but just a process. There ain't no me in here anywhere. It's all just processing.
Yeah.
So good. I'm glad you're doing that. Keep up that.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty interesting.
All right. Well, we'll see you soon then.
Yeah.
Thank you. This has been a good one.
I think so too. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you. See you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.